So I wanted to talk about something that we were discussing in the comments a wee bit. Why is that so pronounced today? And that is that, this is a good way to practice. You know how I frequently talk about there being energetic signatures in experience that can be felt, that are quite kind of intuitive, and you can kind of use them to direct your noticing or your practice. So, for me, the sense of self very much had an energetic signature to it. I could describe it like, how certain people have a vibe. You can feel a vibe off of them. It could be something that you clock and then you're wary of. It could be something that you can't quite explain, or it could be something perceived to be positive. But I would describe that as an energetic signature, something that's felt, that is kind of beyond the limits of the known, beyond the limits of the mind and objectivity. And in our own experience, we can pick up on this if you're in tune with it. And then this can come into experience, this like different kind of distinct, in a felt way, signatures. And we can kind of notice that when that comes in, and we can use that to get clearer on what's going on, really, or get clearer on what's causing that, so to speak. So, for example, for myself, the sense of self very much had an energetic signature to it that was felt, and it was distinct, and it felt like me. And it's not something that, it's something that's quite, it was potent and quite nuanced, and took different forms at different times, but it could be felt. So like, when there was a seriousness or a heaviness, like a great importance or gravity, when I was relating to something, I could be sure that I am identifying with this relationship of me relating to whatever this aspect of experience is, be it like it could be anything, an event, a person, an emotion, a thought. There was this relationship that imbued that experience with a sense of importance and gravity, and that would call about thoughts and behaviours that had a very strong sense of self in them. So let's give an example. So in the space of thought, if we could even do this now. So if you conjure a thought of something like benign, something neutral, an image or something like that, something that you're not particularly invested in with the content of the thought. So that image can just come and go as it likes, and there's not really any gravity to it. So a fox just walked by in front of me there. So an image of a fox walking, that's just something that comes, something that goes. It's an image, it's a thought. The thought has its content. The thought has its form, but that content and form is somewhat neutral and pleasant. So then conjure up an image of something that triggered you recently, or it might not even be recently, some event from the past that is most likely going to involve your relationship with other people. It might not. That is emotionally charged. It feels like a story about me and how I relate to the world and my experience. Or you don't have to conjure it up, because it might be more neutral when you conjure it up, but when it just appears, when it just comes out of the blue and grabs your attention, it feels real. There's very much a sense of the me relating to that thought or experience or reality. It feels real. That's what I mean by the energetic signature. It can have a gravity or an importance or a seriousness about it that makes it distinct from other thoughts. So these are the thoughts that are magnetic. These are the thoughts that open up a world of identity that we can kind of get lost in. And what's clear at the felt level about these thoughts is me, the separate self that's relating to it, that's having the thought, that's relating to the experience. What's not so clear, what's not so clear consciously is that that's happening. It can clearly be felt, but what's happening there sometimes isn't clear, or likely isn't clear if it's felt to be real. So if I conjure the image of a fox walking through the car park, it's just a neutral image. There's not much of a self in that. It's not so important, if you're kind of getting how I'm pointing with this. Looking for that signature when it comes into experience is very valuable. So there's a kind of recognition there, there's a kind of noticing there of the self coming online, and it feels solid, it feels real, it feels potent, it feels like what I am. And then in other situations, in other times, that might have thinned out to the point where it's not even apparent at all. Like when you get really into an activity, or if you get really into I guess that's why people go and see concerts and movies and stuff, because you forget yourself in that. Like the relationship is on screen. It's not the relationship that's happening between me, the self, looking at the screen isn't so obvious. You're kind of pulled into it, and I guess that's why people like getting lost in that world of fiction or reading or something like that. It takes you out of yourself into something, a different kind of experience that doesn't have as much of a potent sense of or experience of self in it. So in my experience, the signature of self, when it came up, it would usually come up to as a defensive thing. It would really usually come up to enforce its own reality. its own position, its own existence. And it did that in a very directed way. It did that in a way that had a lot of momentum behind it, a lot of emotion behind it, and it would usually be in situations where there's a relating to other people. It seems to be more important in those kind of situations. Like if you're on your own, unless you're thinking about relating to other people, or it may not be that, but it was for me, then it's not really, you don't need to validate or defend or insist on that sense of self. It seems to insist on itself when it's threatened. When its validity is threatened, which I guess is why we get like crazy thoughts and crazy emotions when we inquire, because we're directly, from the self's point of view, threatening the validity of its existence. We're questioning it. Like when someone else questions you, in a kind of accusatory way, you're called to defend your own validity as a separate self in opposition to that which is perceived as a threat. So in inquiry, we're kind of doing that to ourselves willingly, which is kind of mental. So we can notice this in daily life, like when you feel that signature come up, and then when you're called to react, and it's usually to insist on a point of view, a conceptual point of view. That's why people are really defensive about opinions and their views, their opinions, because it's so deeply tied to the sense of self. But it's usually to insist upon a conceptual point of view. And the self very much feels like it has to do that. To remain important, to avoid a threat of invalidity or something like that. That's kind of how it works. So when you feel that come up in experience with the associated emotions, and then you're called to react based on what is perceived as a threat to your sense of self, then you can look at like the circumstances around, like what's happening there, what is triggering that signature of self to come strongly into experience, and then inform the belief in that, the felt reality of that, inform your actions and inform your behaviour as it relates to other people. And then is it necessary at all? Is it something that, because the suggestion is that it's entirely necessary, that this is very important, that I have to defend my point of view, that I have to, essentially what's happening there is that you're looking to control the point of view of other people, or control the experience of other people to conform with your view. But if it's clear that that's not even possible, if it's really clear that that's not possible, then it's not important anymore. It's not something, it's the illusion isn't convincing anymore, that I have any sort of control over other people's thoughts, experience and point of view. That's even like remotely possible. That's kind of like what the reactivity is based on. And when you're called to try and defend your identity and its point of view, then it kind of suggests that those points of view, those concepts, are very important because they refer to an actually existing real reality. So there's a belief there that my interpretation of the real is accurate, and it's maybe more accurate than that of other people. That's a really strong thing. You know, I guess this is why there's war and stuff, conflict, violence and such. It's this inherent point of view that views an inherent reality that's a certain way, and then it tries to impose that version of reality on other people in an attempt to control the experience of other people. When you put it like that, it sounds completely mad, doesn't it? But you can watch for this in your own experience when it comes up and see if you can see that that's what's happening. I'm trying to control other people's experience, their thoughts, their emotions. I'm saying that my version of what I think that should be is more correct than what it is. Or the opposite is also true, like that the whole thing's very important as well. It's like charged with gravity and importance. But the other thing is also true. Pardon me, that I believe other people's actions, behaviours, thoughts are controlling how I think and feel. That they're responsible for my thoughts, feelings and emotions. Again, you know, some of you watching this might really disagree with this, potentially. Because the experience feels so real when you're identified with it. But when you're identified with it, you can't actually see what's going on. It's not clear, it's not apparent. But the suggestion is that other people, their action, their behaviour, how they think, feel and act, is directly responsible for how I feel and think. Kind of like some sort of weird mind control things going on here. So we're putting the responsibility for our thoughts, feelings and emotions in the hands of other people by interpreting their thoughts and feelings and emotions and thinking we can control them. But really, we pay the price for that because we're putting our emotional and psychological well-being in the hands of other people who we can't control whatsoever. So then we're at the mercy of our circumstances, psychologically and emotionally. We were not in control at all of our own mental and emotional autonomy. You know, seeing this very clearly even removes the whole autonomy thing altogether. When we stop looking out to try and comprehend the experience of other people and then look within to try and comprehend what's going on here. Good, because I'm paying the price for this. I'm the one whose emotions are all over the place and my thoughts are going wild and I'm suffering because I'm constantly looking out and trying to interpret the experience of other people and what that means in relation to me. And for myself, at a certain point, that got way out of control, like like really, really out of control. Because I wasn't looking back into myself, and I wasn't in that way taking responsibility for my own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I was blaming my external circumstances, which are created by my thoughts, feelings, and emotions, my identity. I was blaming my own creation, my own unreal creation, for how I feel. So the whole thing ended up being very extremely delusional, and none of it made sense, because because how can that make any sort of sense? It's completely ignorant. It's completely delusional. But it's not intentional in that way, really, fundamentally, because it's like a kind of a relational function based on identity that has just kind of got out of control, and it starts running automatically, and its whole purpose here is to protect the sense of self, to protect the me, to keep this me, this self, safe from its circumstances. But it misses that its circumstances are its own interpretation, its own projection, that is segmented up, labelled and valued and judged based on this subjective point of view of the separate self. That's the thing that can be seen for what it is being really just a bunch of emotionally charged beliefs and interpretations of life and experience reality. They are essentially fictional from the ultimate perspective. That's why you can change them in an instant. You can reframe something consciously, you can just reframe it, and then you can feel better or feel different or worse based on that reframing. So if that's not clear, imagine you ever been in a situation where something that would have really triggered you usually just doesn't, and you're like, that's weird, that would usually have been, or the same event happens twice. One time you react a certain way to it, and then the other time you don't. That's only possible because these are just fictional interpretations. It's all based on my reaction to things, based on my subjective point of view, which, the whole thing is created in thought, which is this kind of wavy, ephemeral, ghost-like apparition that is infinitely shape-shifting and changing and is a complete mystery anyway. So there's something that's much more real than that, and getting in touch with that, which is much more real, really stabilizes this whole thing. So when this signature appears in experience, just become attentive and notice, like, people describe this to me constantly. Like, this isn't something that I tell. I barely make this type of video. People tell me this all the time. I notice the self come back online and it feels like this, and this is what it's surrounding, and I'm like, that's incredible work, that's incredible clarity and vigilance that you can even notice that, because that means there's clarity here. That means that identity doesn't have a full hold. This is why, like, those of you who watch this channel who think you've not had an awakening, you're more awake than you think you are. In the way that you talk to me, I can see it. The self just is hard on itself, and that's why it seems to be evasive and elusive and not clear sometimes. But this whole meing and being thing, people will say to me that it comes online, you can feel it, it has a signature to it, and its signature is usually unsatisfactoriness with its circumstances, and a need to control those circumstances to make them more satisfactory, which is the desire and aversion in the Buddhist traditions. It's simply noticing that what am I trying to impose? What is my version of reality that I'm trying to impose right now? What about this that's happening or happened? Because it's all already happened by the time we imposed this framework on it, this fiction. What has happened that, I don't like? And can I change that? Do I have any control over that? And who pays the price for believing that I can control it? So, for example, I'll put this into kind of example, right? The one that struck me the most, and I talked about this at the start of the channel, is like I used to be a very angry person, like just full of rage. You wouldn't think it now, but just full of rage. I used to have like really aggressive, violent thoughts, and really kind of resentful and vengeful thoughts. And I suffered for it. And part of that was, I used to, I better not go too into detail with certain things. Right, so I need to be careful what I'm saying if I'm going to post it on YouTube. So what happened was, I was walking to work and there was a red light. So the green man comes up when you walk across the road. So I went to walk across the road, and someone in the car sped up really fast, slammed the brakes on, and I thought they were going to go into me. I really got fright, so I kind of reacted to it. And then when the danger, the perception of danger was over, in an instant, I just walked on. And then a bit later on, I was like, it was weird that I didn't react to that, because my usual reaction would have been to go to the person in the car and say, what was that? What are you doing? You trying to kill me? Escalate the situation so that I could justify anger and aggression, so that I could express that, because you just see an opportunity to express that. You magnetically attract other people that are looking to express that. You meet each other, and then you're just like, okay, now it's time to express the shadow, or whatever you'd like to call it, or the pain body Eckhart Tolle talks about. But this time it was just like nothing other than being surprised that there was no reaction. So there was the physical reaction to danger, which moved through in an instant, and I felt it viscerally. And then when that was gone, there usually there would have been a second movement. The anger would the fear would trigger the anger, and the anger would very much inform my actions after that. But this time it was just a fear. There was a movement of anger. I'm not even sure it was an anger. It was more like defensive anger. And then it just moved. It was gone. It's like what it was like, it's like it came up my back and shot out my head, and it just went into the sky or something like that, and it was gone. It just moved so quickly, and it was back to peace, and I just walked on. And that was a moment of progress for me in my thoughts, feelings and behaviours, that I didn't react. You know, this is just one example that stood out at the start. But it's like the reaction that we're used to, the reaction that the mind like narrates and tells you is justified. It's based on imagination. You know, you don't have to carry this narrative about with you to react effectively to situations. There was another one as well. I'll tell you this because it's funny. So I was walking back home from work. Strangely enough, this was pretty much bang in the same place that this happened. And there was a drunk guy stoating up. So I saw him kind of look at me, and I was like, this guy's acting weird. So as he gets close to me, he throws like a spinning roundhouse kick, like that kind of went past my head, and I just kind of moved out the road, and I was taken back by it, and I just stopped and I laughed, and then he laughed, and I just walked up the road, and I was like, this guy just tried to roundhouse kick me for no reason. This is really, really strange. But that's another one where it was just like, it was just kind of funny, and it wasn't, you know, in the slightest bit triggering whatsoever. Still think it's kind of weird though. I mean, I could give you many other examples of similar things, social things that, you know, that's kind of how, like I said, this clarifies in retrospect. It's like the reactivity just isn't there anymore. In retrospect, you notice, like, in comparison to my memory of what it was before, it's completely different. But you're not making that comparison all the time because you're not thinking about it in an identified way. But it's very much that signature is how to look out for it. When you see that signature move in experience, you know to be attentive, you know to be vigilant, and see clearly what's actually happening. Feel clearly what you're feeling. Because these reactions are pretty much all an aversion to sensation, an aversion to feeling, essentially. You're trying to change the sensory experience and how you feel emotionally. So can you be more comfortable with what is? And is it even possible to change it? Anyway, that'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.